The March of Time. Still in doubt in the contest between the Soviets and the West is the Muslim world, a mighty aggregation of peoples and lands. Divided by race and tradition, but united by their religious faith, they resent foreign domination and embrace a common ideal, independence at any cost. From the Atlantic shores of its Moroccan outpost, Islam stretches across French North Africa and Libya, and includes Egypt, still trying to banish the last symbols of former British rule. Of all Islam, Turkey, next door neighbor to the Soviet Union, is the most clearly committed to the West. While the oil-rich Muslim countries round the Persian Gulf are economically and strategically the most important, teeming Pakistan, with its vast human resources, aspires to the political leadership of Islam. But today, the eyes of an anxious world are focused on Iran, a land of rugged mountains and parched deserts, which long before the Muslim faith was born was the center of the wealth and glory of the ancient Persian kings. For beneath the monuments and tombs of Darius and Xerxes lie invaluable deposits of oil, more than 10% of the whole world's known reserves. And at Abadan is the world's largest oil refinery. Since 1909, the petroleum resources of Iran have, by concession, been exploited by the Anglo-Iranian Oil Company, in which the British government owns a controlling interest. The great modern refinery at Abadan is capable of turning out daily more than 500,000 barrels of high-octane gasoline and other essential petroleum products. This fabulous output has been carried overseas in the company's fleet of more than 300 owned and chartered tankers. Today, both the peaceful economy and the defensive strength of the free world are heavily dependent upon this oil, which has supplied more than a quarter of Britain's needs and a fifth of the requirements of Western Europe. Crisis in Iran made news in the spring of 1951, when long smoldering Iranian nationalists made clear their intention to seize the oil industry and expropriate the British company. Scornful of Anglo-Iranians' offers to increase royalties substantially, extremists in the capital city of Tehran clamored for immediate confiscation. Quickly responsive to the pressure of the excited Tehran population, and skillfully dragooned by an ultra-nationalist group of only 8 deputies, the parliament fell in line behind an old enemy of the British, the ascetic, bitter Mohammed Mossadegh. After hearing a series of harangues, the deputies voted unanimously to confiscate Britain's oil holdings. At the British Embassy, Ambassador Sir Francis Shepherd and Anglo-Iranians Richard Seddon received with all possible calm the shattering news that Britain stood to lose her most valuable foreign asset, should the expropriation take effect. In London, at the company's headquarters, board chairman Sir William Fraser veiled the drama with words of regret.
We have made a very large contribution to the revenue of Iran and to the expansion of her economy. No higher standards of social and industrial progress have been set by any business. The continuance of this good work depends upon the maintenance of the partnership between the Iranian nation and the company. It would be sad indeed if this fruitful partnership should cease after so many years.
But Britain's deep and real concern was shown when paratroopers were dispatched to airfields at Cyprus, 900 miles from Iran. In Washington, Iranian Ambassador Nasrallah Entazam voiced his country's determination to oust the British oilmen.
For 50 years, the oil resources of my country have been exploited by a foreign company whose profits have gone overseas. To maintain its monopoly, the company has discriminated against its Iranian employees and involved itself in intrigue and political activities. The time has now come to put an end to these painful practices and to put Iran's natural resources to use of the well-being and benefit of her own people.
A changeless land of peasants and nomads, strategically located Iran was coveted by both Britain and Russia long before oil was discovered. When Britain won concessions from Iran and oil production started in earnest, ancient Persia began to catch up with the 20th century. Iranians who had always lived primitively and had known no way of life but farming found jobs in their country's new oil industry. Further drastic changes in Iranian life came after World War I, when an ambitious and purposeful army colonel, Reza Khan, seized power and arranged to have himself installed as Shah. During World War II, Nazi intrigue gripped Iran, and Reza Shah was forced to abdicate after the Allies, mistrusting his loyalty to their cause, moved in. Ignoring for the moment their historic rivalry in the Middle East, Britons and Russians met and fraternized, and in a flush of enthusiasm took time out to toast their new alliance and the victory they felt would ultimately be theirs. Soon they were joined by the Americans, bringing Lend-Lease supplies from the titanic production lines of the U.S. Consignments to the Persian Gulf Command during the war totaled upwards of 5 million tons, transshipped across Iran to the Soviet Union. Almost overnight, Iran had become not only a logistics center in the greatest war the world had ever known, but an historic rendezvous as well. Meeting at Tehran to discuss their common world strategy, the Big Three took time to reaffirm an earlier pledge to respect the sovereignty of Iran. But soon the Soviet Union, through intrigue and intimidation, was seeking to annex Iran's northern province. And only under pressure of world opinion, aired in the United Nations, did the Russians finally withdraw. Tehran today is a city of extremes. Dominated by a statue of Reza Shah, Tehran's great square is surrounded by modern government buildings. In stark contrast to the glittering 20th century facade are the city's open gutters, serving both as water mains and as sewers. Nearby are the teeming bazaars and slums, where most of Tehran's 1 million people still live, in ignorance and filth, as they have for generations past. Outside its crowded capital, Iran is sparsely settled. In the remote provinces along the shores of the Caspian Sea, primitive Iranians still follow a way of life unchanged for centuries. In isolated villages, impoverished peasants wash themselves and their belongings in stagnant, germ-ridden pools. Many of them die young of malaria, dysentery, and other endemic diseases. Employing methods as old as the hills around them, Iranian women manage as best they can to provide bread for their young. Though 85% of Iran's 16 million people live on the land, fertilizers are so scarce and equipment so primitive that crops are invariably small. Most Iranian peasants are merely tenant farmers, giving half or even up to 3/4 of all they grow as rent to their landlord. Chronically in debt and living in virtual peonage, they own little more than the clothes they wear. Unwilling to turn back more than a small portion of their profits toward improving the soil, Iran's wealthy landowners live in luxury, paying few taxes and investing their money abroad. In an attempt to break down his country's feudalism, the new Shah, liberal, Western-minded Mohammad Reza Pahlavi, 32-year-old son of the late Reza Shah, has turned over to his peasants thousands of acres of his own personal lands. He hoped in vain that others would follow his example. Bent on giving his people a measure of the progress and prosperity he saw and admired on a recent visit to the U.S., the Shah has taken an interest in Iranian education. And well he might, for 4/5 of Iran's population are illiterate. Though a few modern schools have recently been built, with some financial aid from the Crown, the law providing for free and compulsory education is not enforced. And except in the larger cities, Iranian girls seldom attend school. At technical training centers, instruction is given in spinning and weaving, thus perpetuating the ancient Persian art of rug making. Sharing her brother's enthusiasm for social work, the Shah's twin sister, Princess Ashraf, has shown real interest in the betterment of her people. The princess regularly visits and oversees the operation of the royal clinics, where the poor are treated free of charge. Like the royal family, the Anglo-Iranian Oil Company has done a good deal of welfare work, and not for its employees alone. Among its varied projects in the fields of education and medicine is the new 400-bed wing at the Shahabad Sanitarium for Tuberculosis. Behind the crisis in Iran in the spring of 1951 lay the power and influence of the Muslim hierarchy. For though Iranians are not all strict practitioners of their faith, they believe and obey religious leaders like Mullah Kashani, who had pressed long and vigorously for nationalization of his country's oil. Kashani received support from all that was anti-British and anti-American, ranging from so-called peace organizations to the Tudeh, or Communist Party. Though officially outlawed, the Tudeh Party, most militant and best organized in Iran, strives through its many fronts to keep alive in Iranian hearts the fear of a new war and to fan the hatred of the Western democracies. Menaced by both overt and hidden forces, teetered the government of aging, neurotic Mohammad Mossadegh, who, after waging a successful battle for the oil nationalization law, suddenly found himself prime minister. As Mossadegh moved to put his new law into effect, a sincere effort to bring the Iranians and the British together for negotiations was made by U.S. Ambassador Henry F. Grady. Largely through Grady's good offices, London sent a special mission to Iran. Chief British negotiator was Anglo-Iranian's Basil Jackson, who brought with him what was generally considered a fair offer. To Iran's finance minister, Mohammad Ali Barrister, Jackson pledged substantial cash payments. And for a new Iranian-owned but British-managed company, he promised continued technical assistance. Mossadegh wanted none of it. As the crisis worsened and anti-British feeling mounted, Iranian army units were deployed to maintain order. As the Iranian authorities moved to take over oil plants and docks, and the British technicians unanimously refused to accept employment with the new regime, the situation seemed hopeless. Meanwhile, the last British families finished their packing as word came from London that special evacuation planes were on their way. Section by section, the great Abadan refinery began closing down. An oil-hungry world was left to wonder what might happen next. What had taken place received pungent interpretation by a veteran American observer of Middle Eastern affairs, Supreme Court Justice William O. Douglas.
The oil crisis in Iran is a part of the breaking up of colonialism. Neither America nor any other power can stop the popular revolution that is sweeping Iran and all the East. But we can and we must guide it, and guide it along democratic lines.
In the heavily charged atmosphere of Tehran, the diplomatic corps still could exchange amenities at receptions given by the British Embassy. Soviet Ambassador Ivan Sadchikov, more than any of the others present, was smugly aware that the Kremlin had gained a new strategic advantage. For any new instability in Iran might pave the way for Russian infiltration. This, in turn, could outflank the Turkish bastion, main strong point against communism in the Middle East, and open a red road to the Mediterranean and to Suez, to the oil of Iraq and Arabia, to the coveted ports of the Persian Gulf, and even to Pakistan and India. Iran's newly militant nationalism has not kept her from accepting American aid for her small army, each man of which is personally sworn to defend the Shah. The soldiers of Iran, too, share deeply in the desire for modernity and progress which today is sweeping the Muslim world. A desire to raise their nation above any colonial status, imagined or real. And as they look to America for encouragement and material aid, they know that for Iran, as for her neighbors, the clear and present danger lies in the ancient enemy to the north. The one imperial power which, if it once took hold of a weakened, troubled land, would never peacefully let go. Time marches on.